Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to move on to part 2, panel discussion CCS project and finance. Now, for the 5 panelists, I would like to introduce in the alphabetical order. Vivul Shetty-san, the Director of Energy Transition from Howden Specialty and Climate Risk and Resilience. From JOGMEC, Mr. Satoru Takahashi, Dr. Satoru Takahashi, Director of General Coordination Division of the JOGMEC. And from the Mitsubishi Corporation, Mr. Masao Koyama, Deputy General Manager for the Carbon Management Team. And from Mizuho Bank, Mr. Kentaro Sakaguchi, the Deputy General Manager, Head of Energy and Natural Resources. And from Sumitomo Corporation, Mr. Junya Takahashi, Assistant to General Manager for CCUS Team Leader. For the panel itself, the Global Finance Sector Lead from Global CCS Institute, Ms. Christina Stipe, will be the facilitator. May I hand over to you, Christina?
Thank you, Yasuo, for that kind introduction. As Yasuo said, I am Christina Stipe from the Global CCS Institute based in Houston, and my role is Global Finance Sector Lead. And I'd like to welcome everyone to our panel today on CCS projects and finance. I'd very much like to thank my esteemed panelists for taking the time to join us today. And before we begin, I would like to share a few remarks to help set the stage for our panel discussion. Then each of our panelists will share a short presentation, and following that, we will begin our panel. And then finally, at the end, we will have some time for Q&A from the audience. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Yes, so let me get started and set the stage for our discussion today. So we know that mobilizing private finance in combination with enabling government policy is key to deploying CCS at scale. And the Institute has been focused on the need for capital allocation to CCS. As an example, in 2021, thought leadership from the Institute identified a need of between $655 billion and $1.2 trillion US dollars to meet the need for CCS in the IEA Sustainable Development Scenarios. So building on that existing engagement that we've had with the finance sector, we are now expanding our engagement and have identified this as one of our key strategies going forward and an opportunity for impact for the Institute. So to date, as part of this engagement strategy, we have been undertaking ongoing outreach with the finance sector to better understand the status of financing CCS and to help surface conditions and challenges that are impacting opportunities for deployment. We are also developing finance-focused thought leadership. And as an example, my colleagues Salim Sevakil and Jared Thomas recently published a thought leadership report that includes an examination of 3 US-focused CCS business models. First, for clean hydrogen in the US Gulf Coast. Next, the Midwest ethanol hubs. And finally, a CCS retrofit in power generation. We will continue to develop finance-focused thought leadership and are evaluating multiple finance-focused convenings to be held in 2024. And finally, we are planning and we are open to collaboration with stakeholders in the finance sector, investors, banks, NGOs, to leverage our collective impact in this space. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, private finance is enabling policy, private finance with enabling policy is key to deploying CCS at scale. And that in one way or another, in every country of the world, because they're all different, and through a combination of carrots and sticks, the private sector must be incentivized to invest in CCS. And over the past 2 years, there have been significant policy and regulatory developments aimed to reduce CO2 emissions, including the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, in the United States, and the EU's Fit for 55 package. Japan has also progressed its CCS roadmap, and as we heard today, has announced support for 7 CCS projects that will capture CO2 in Japan for storage in the offshore waters off Japan and in the wider Asia-Pacific region. In 2023, there have been strengthening fiscal incentives that have included operational and capital support for CCS projects. So in summary, the introduction of strong and decisive policies and regulations has improved the business case for CCS projects and has led to a significant increase in the announcement of CCS investments. Next slide, please. And so you can see that demonstrated here on this map, and this map is excerpted from our recently published Global Status of CCS 2023 report. And briefly, what you can see here is a concentration of CCS projects in geographies where enabling policies are in place, including the US, Europe, and Japan. And I'll also add that overall, the project pipeline exhibited strong year-on-year growth over the past 6 years. And as of July 2023, we had identified that there are 392 facilities in the pipeline, representing a 102% increase from the previous year. There are 41 facilities in operation, and they have a collective capacity to capture and store 49 million tons per annum. The Institute is also tracking 26 projects in construction and 325 projects in development globally. So again, this growth has been driven by strong policy, particularly in North America and Europe. And in the United States alone, federal policy is unlocking the potential for hundreds of millions of tons per annum of CCS deployment in this decade. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our panel today is going to be focused on CCS projects and finance. We know that CCS needs to continue to scale to meet climate mitigation goals. So what else is needed from a projects and finance standpoint? Reaching the required scale of CCS will require all of us to work together. Governments to put enabling policy in place, the private sector to build, own, and operate, and the financial sector to provide the capital. We need to enable CCS investment through appropriate policy and market mechanisms. And that includes the continued advancement of supportive policies to maximize the growth of the number of projects that we find in the project development pipeline. Some of those policies would be those that would underpin a more robust value on carbon, that would provide compelling and complementary tax incentives and facilitate CO2 transport and storage hubs to attract more local capture projects. And there remains, of course, a large role for government to provide enabling policies for CCS deployment. So today, we're going to hear perspectives on CCS projects and finance from our panelists, who all have different roles in advancing CCS deployment. And we're going to hear their thoughts and insights on CCS financing. Thank you very much.
So now, Christina, you can proceed with the panel session based on that. Nothing.
Okay, well, I think we would like to first welcome our first panelist to come and provide a presentation to the audience. So, Mr. Satoru Takahashi of JOGMEC, we welcome you to the podium for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Christina.
I'm Takahashi. I'm with JOGMEC. Glad to be here. The title of this presentation, JOGMEC and financing function. I would just like to share with you mostly our financing functions of JOGMEC. Next page, please. First of all, very brief introduction. Regarding our organization, in November, as it gives you more detailed information in the next slide. In JOGMEC Act was revised. Name has been changed to Japan Organization for Metals and Energy Security. In the past, oil and natural gas and metal, those were our main lines of businesses, but there has been organizational change, hence the name has also been changed. Regarding our mission, natural resources, for stable supply, secure the stable supply, that's the mission. In these 6 areas, oil and natural gas, metals, coal, geothermal, stockpiling, and mine pollution control. These are the 6 areas that we have been active. Regarding our main function, financial support, as you can see, for high-risk projects, supply risk money, we have the equity capital liability guarantee. By utilizing this system, extending support. There's another. We have a group of experts, engineers, so regarding those facilities, technical matters, we can extend technical support as well. Together with private businesses, we can do joint feasibility studies, or we can do various kinds of technical studies so that various issues people have at the operation field and site can be resolved. Next, please. As I shared with you, November last year, JOGMEC Act was amended and implemented. As you can see on the left-hand side, we used to be Japan Oil, Gas and Metals National Corporation, JOGMEC. But in addition to that, CCS, ammonia, hydrogen, ammonia, and wind power. Those 3 functions have been added, and a new JOGMEC, hence the new name, and as a new organization, we have been reborn. But if you look at the original mission, it's actually the same as before, stable supply of energy. So toward that end, we are engaged in various activities. Next page, please. So 1 page before, that's JOGMEC's business tools for CCS. These are support tools we have for CCS. Left to right, you can see how the project progresses. At each given stage, various support plans are available. For instance, pre-study stage, feasibility studies, financial support, and in relation to CCS, the site survey for CCT, possible CCT, and we can extend such support. And beyond that, that's the equity capital and liability guarantee to project companies. We can extend financial support to further promote CCS. Those are the schemes available. Next page, please. Here, at the pre-FEED level, this is feasibility studies related map. It's just an example or examples. So globally, we are conducting these efforts, not just the CCS. Ammonia projects are also included in this page. Together with ammonia production, the CO2 is emitted, so using that CO2 for CCS. On those projects, together with the private businesses, we are engaged in various studies. Next page, please. Regarding this one, in the morning session, you already heard this several times. JOGMEC in advanced CCS projects this year. So we ask for request for proposals, and there are some conditions. First of all, before 2030, by fiscal year 2030, injecting CO2, and it's at 0.5 million TPA or more. From the capture to transportation and storage, including all these stages, we extend support to such projects covering all these stages from various companies. We received applications, and within JobMec, very carefully, we made assessment. As a result, JobMec selected 7 role model projects. Of the 7 projects, 5 are for domestic storage and 2 are for overseas storage according to the current plan. Regarding this project or projects, from various industries, the CO2 is emitted. So capturing that CO2 and injecting that CO2. 7 projects as a total. 13 million TPA of CO2 per year will be injected according to the current plan. Regarding this project, this is the first time here in Japan, and Mr. Saiki from METI mentioned this, and other presenters also referred to these projects. So on the part of JobMec, from the beginning of the project to the implementation of the project on various stages, we extend financial support. That we are building such schemes, and also for advanced CCS projects, as you can see on this slide, towards promotion of CCS projects, we have been engaged in various activities. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Takahashi. If I can please invite Mr. Kentaro Sakaguchi, Deputy General Manager from Mizuho Bank, to the podium. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. Today, I'd like to discuss how commercial banks would approach financing transactions for the potential CCS projects. Please move on to the next page. Mizuho Bank is one of the major project finance players and supporting numerous infrastructure energy development projects globally. And I also have personal experience in project finance origination for 15 years. Then today, based on my experience, I'd like to briefly mention how we would assess the potential financing transaction for CCS projects, mainly from the viewpoint of project finance. Why project finance? First of all, there could be two approaches to financing this kind of projects. The first one is corporate finance, which is based on the creditworthiness of the company who will be developing the CCS projects. That's, technically speaking, relatively easy because we will just check the creditworthiness of the company. Then, as long as that is satisfactory, we will not conduct detailed due diligence of the project itself. It's more simplest and quicker form of financing arrangement. But there's a limitation on such approach because it totally depends on the creditworthiness of the developer. So if the project size is huge, we would expect this kind of CCS project could worth $1 billion. So it's not easy for every project developer to finance such project on a corporate basis. And second, these projects is similar to infrastructure projects which have longer project life. So therefore, investment recovery period tended to be longer. It could be 15 years, 20 years. Otherwise, economics doesn't make sense. So financing plan should also be the one which enables like, a long-term financing. And the corporate financing is not so suitable for such kind of cases. On the other hand, project finance is widely used to finance this kind of large infrastructure projects with heavy upfront investment is needed and with longer project life. That's the first comment. And the second, today I'd like to mainly discuss about transportation and storage projects. I know CCS also means carbon capture, but the carbon capture part is, should be considered more like an ancillary facility or supporting infrastructure for the emitters project. So it is more suitable to develop together with the emitters projects, such as power generation or ammonia production plants. And then, so that's why I'd like to mainly discuss on transportation storage projects. And so how we would approach to this project? The biggest challenge is that at this moment, there's no established market precedent. So we can't say with 100% assurance that this is a kind of established model. If you follow that approach, we can provide financing. But having said that, for this kind of new project, our thinking process is firstly starting from the taking example of a similar infrastructure projects and find the similarity and apply similar kind of thought process. Then focus on the unique feature of the CCS, maybe technical, maybe commercial. Then consider CCS-specific risks and mitigations. And then to be specific, so what is the risks we need to address to provide financing to these kind of projects? There could be several risks, but we think the most crucial one is revenue risks. How to ensure long-term and stable revenue for the projects, because that is the most critical enabler of any large-scale infrastructure financing. There could be several ways contractual models can be considered. But anyway, the key principle is that to ensure long-term stable revenue and not affected by something that is out of the control of the project developer. So for example, it shouldn't be affected by CO2 price risks and shouldn't be affected by the CO2 volume risks, because that is outside of the control of the transportation storage provider. And other technical part specific to CCS is probably CO2 injection risks and the CO2 leakage risk. This needs a kind of detailed technical due diligence, and together with appropriate regulation to limit the risks. But this is relatively straightforward. It's all limited to technical feature. But revenue risk, commercial structuring, that is a more kind of complex matter because which needs alignment of interest and risk tolerance of many contract parties. So on page 3, the time is next page, please. The time is limited, but what could be the contractual models which enable a stable revenue flow? One is similar to energy export projects. So that is an emitter commit to pay a stable kind of fee based on the CO2 storage capacity. That's one way. And the second way is if that is not possible, then sponsors of the T&S call could provide a stable fee as a tolling arrangement and receive service fee separately from potential emitters. In that way, more kind of flexible arrangement can be possible between sponsor and emitter, and the sponsor may have a chance to take upside if a CO2 price go up in the future. And third case, the fee payer or toll payer could be a governmental entity. In that case, which become more similar to PPP projects. And again, in this case, no long-term offtake commitment or long-term service usage commitment from the emitter side is required. So more kind of flexible arrangement can be needed. It can be made. And the last case, which is taking from United Kingdom case, I think it could be also structured as a regulated asset-based model, but it is more technically complex because it needs lots of conditions to be satisfied to make it work. For example, in the underlying regulation, which makes any emitter to use that project, so it is not always possible to apply this model to in everywhere in the world. It needs kind of special environment or regulatory conditions. We can discuss later. And that's the basic point. So the next page, please. So other risks, as I mentioned, the unique technical risk which needs careful due diligence is a CO2 storage amount risk and also a potential leakage risk. In that part, I think it is related to what kind of regulatory regime is required. So we can discuss later in the panel discussion. And for other parts, if a CCS project involves cross-border transportation of the CO2, then there needs to be another kind of legal arrangement, such as London Protocol and CCS Business Act and similar regulation to clearly set out rights and obligations of the developer, and also a JCM mechanism to properly allocate carbon capture or carbon credit between the country of the emitter and the country of the storage operator. And it's a unique topic in relation to cross-border T&S and shipping technology. That is also an important factor because if shipping doesn't work, the whole value chain doesn't work. So currently, no established technology to enable large volume CO2 shipment. So then currently, a new container technology is being developed. So we need to see the successful demonstration of such technologies. Thank you. That's basically it, and I'd like to discuss these points further in the later discussion stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sakaguchi. If I could please invite Mr. Genya Takahashi, Team Leader, CCUS Team Energy Innovation Initiative, Sumitomo Corporation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So please go to the next page. Yes. So first of all, thank you very much for having time, and it's a great honor to join that panel. So today, I'd like to explain our Sumitomo Corporation, the CCUS strategy and the business activity as well. So please, next. Yeah. So first of all, let me introduce the Sumitomo Corporation itself. So probably all of you know that the Sumitomo Corporation has originally the 6 business units. So like this. On top of that, so that we decided, or that we established the new the business unit, which calls Energy Innovation Initiatives, in order for us to tackle with the climate the change or something like that. So in order for us to do that, so we have the 3 main pillars in this the initiatives. The first one is, the carbon-free energy development, like hydrogen, ammonia, or the sustainability aviation fuel. And the second pillar is new power and energy service development, like a battery or the solar panel or something like that. And the third one is the carbon management business, so which includes the CCUS as well. So we Sumitomo Corporation CCUS teams is now working under these pillars. Please go to the next page. And then the next slide shows the Sumitomo Corporation carbon neutrality policy. As you can see on the left-hand side, we Sumitomo Corporation, as of 2019, 60 million tons of the CO2 has emitted. It's not small, it's huge. So that means Sumitomo Corporation, we are positioning as the CO2 emitter, as well as the project developer of the CCS. So that means the role of the CCS for us is, first one is the contribution to the Sumitomo Corporation Group carbon neutrality. And the second one is the carbon neutrality to the society through the business. That's the role of the CCS. Next page, please. And then this slide shows the initiative of the CCUS. So as you can see, as you know, the CCUS has a very long value chain from the emitter to the storage. So that means that we CCUS teams is now focusing on the 3 business domains. The first one is the capturing service. Second one is the transportation and service. Transportation and storage, And the last one is the CDR, as a utilization, including the BECS and the DACS. So those 3 main domains have to be connected as a full value chain. Then the CCUS, I believe, must be materialized. The next page, please. This is the last page for me. And then under those strategy or the policy, so we are now developing some CCS project, not only Japan, but also all over the world. And then we are dividing the world into the 2 parts. The first one is the Europe and the Americas. And the second one is the APAC, including Japan and the Middle East. So this means that the Europe and America is a kind of the advanced market for the CCS. That means that we try to commercialize the business as soon as possible. So on the other hand, the APEC, including Japan and the Middle East, is a kind of the big potential market. That means we try to make a good relationship with a partner to make a feasibility study, to make a business toward 2030 or something like that. That's our policy. So let me give you some example of some project in this map. So one of the interesting area for us in North America is Canada, the Alberta states. So we are very much, how can I say, policy and regulation in place well. So that's why as a private company, we are easily enter into those markets to develop some business. So, and UK as well. So UK also has the good policy and the regulations. So we also try to enter that market as well. So such kind of things we are now doing. On the other hand, in APAC, so the cross-border, the CCS is one of the key potential area for us. So one of the example for us is from Japan to Australia, we have some MOU together with the K-Line and the Toho Gas and the Woodside in the Australian energy company. Those kind of things we are now doing. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Genya. If I could please welcome Mr. Masao Koyama, Head Director of Carbon Dioxide Removal for Mitsubishi Corporation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sorry. My name is Masao from Mitsubishi Corporation, and thank you very much for this opportunity to speak about Mitsubishi's activities. So I'm leading the Mitsubishi's CDL activities. So CDL stands for carbon dioxide removals. It's like a DAX or BECS project, like a remove CO2 from the atmosphere and store it permanently, like a CCS. Next slide, please. And before the deep dive into the CDL, so quickly let me explain Mitsubishi's entire decarb activities. So this is a Mitsubishi decarb activities, and we call EX strategies. So EX stands for energy transformation. So EX strategy almost equal to the Mitsubishi decarb activities. And as you know, Mitsubishi is one of the largest conglomerate company together with Sumitomo. So we covered multiple industries still. We have lots of business in the multiple industries, such as steel, power generation, cement, food. And all industries need a decarbonization. And also, collaboration between the industries is very critical to achieve net zero Paris Agreement. So I think Mitsubishi is in a very good position to work on the decarb activities. And we are aiming to be like a one-stop decarb solution providers. So within Mitsubishi, we do a CCS, we do the hydrogen, we do the EV, or we do the clean plastics. So we can cover almost all decarb solutions within Mitsubishi Corporation, and also facing almost all industries. So as Mitsubishi, as a conglomerate company, we like to contribute to the decarbonization or net zero of all our clients and also global network. And also for the CCUS, so if we develop a CCS, we need a multiple CO2 source, such as from steel industry or power generation. And also captured CO2 can be stored and also can be utilized for e-fuel or e-chemicals, blah, blah, blah. So we can do everything within Mitsubishi Corporation, connecting the multiple industries of Mitsubishi Corporation. And next slide, please. And move on to the CDL. So CDL, again, stands for the carbon dioxide removals. And in Japan, someone says negative emission technologies. As you know, everyone says net zero by 2050. Nobody says zero emissions. It means we have residual emissions by 2030, in the 2050, and IPCC said roughly 5 to 16 billion ton of emission will be remained, and that one needs to be offset by carbon dioxide removals such as DAX or BECS. And and also reforestation. As describing here, so carbon dioxide removal has two solutions. One is nature-based solution, and the other one is a text-based solution. And nature-based solution is like afforestation or reforestation. I think that is the cheapest way to remove CO2. But as you can imagine, so we cannot plant tree in London, Tokyo, or New York. So land is limited. So nature-based solution cannot meet all the offsetting to residual emissions. So we need a technological solution to remove CO2 from atmosphere, such as DAX project. So I'm leading the tech CDL project development within the Mitsubishi corporations. Next slide, please. And maybe in Japan, so CDL is not so popular term, but I think CCUS is popular right now. So this slide is describing what is the difference between CDL and also CCUS. And this table with the 12 boxes showing the overall CCUS project. And the vertical axis showing what kind of CO2 is captured, and the horizontal axis showing how CO2 is stored or utilized. And carbon dioxide removals refer to the project or technologies which can remove CO2 from atmosphere and store permanently. So within the CCUS in this chart, so carbon dioxide removal is limited to the four boxes on in bottom left for one. For example, biogenic CO2 from biomass power solution or bioethanol plant is stored into the geological storage, which is called a BECS, or dielectric capture CO2 stored into the geological storage, which is called a DAX. So I'm focused on four boxes in a green box and on the top bottom left. Next slide, please. And this is a current, sorry, go back. And this is currently Mitsubishi's all CDL activities right now. And within Mitsubishi, we have both nature-based solution team and tech-based solution team, and I'm mainly in charge of a tech-based solution team. And the first three tech CDL solutions, such as biochar, mineralization, or enhanced weathering, is not related to CCS, but a BECS or DAX is related to CCS. And again, Mitsubishi is conglomerate, and biochar is related to agriculture business, mineralization related to concrete business, and the CCS related to the oil and gas industry. So as a conglomerate Mitsubishi Corporation, so we are very in a good position to develop any types of the CDL project within Mitsubishi Corporation. And also we have invested in the Breakthrough Energy Catalyst, which is led by Bill Gates, like a global decarb fund, as a first Asian LP investor, and one of the key focus is direct capture. And finally came to the this panel discussion topics, how to finance project. And to monetize CDR project, only solution would be the carbon credit. So we also working on the carbon credit development to monetize direct capture or CDR project. And we established a next-gen CDR facility. I will explain in next slide. And also I'm sitting at the steering committee of the CCS Plus initiatives to develop the methodology, how to generate carbon credit from the CCUS project. Next slide, please. And this is my final slide, so please let me quickly explain the next-gen CDR facility. So it's like a carbon credit trading platform, matching the carbon credit demand buyers and also carbon credit project suppliers. And we aggregate buyers who are willing to pay high premium to the CDR project, and we deploy such a demand into the project. And we commit to the offtake CDR credit from the project, and we like to give the revenue certainty to the project side before their FID, and we like to support or contribute to scaling these industries. And we have already committed to the purchase offtake CDR from future BICAS project, which is called Summit Carbon Solutions. This is a BICAS BEX project in the US, so capture CO2 from bioethanol plant and the stored geological storage. And also we have committed to purchase from 1.5, which is a directly capture, and the CCS project in Houston, Texas. And we launched this project with the five premier buyers, such as BCG or Mitsui Shipping last May in Davos. And we are still expanding buyers in those projects to scale these industries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Koyama. And finally, I'd like to invite Mr. Gopal Shetty from Howden Specialty. He is Director of Energy Transition. Thank you. Keep advancing the slides, please. No, keep advancing the slides, please. Keep going, please.
There we go. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I thank GCSSI for having me, and the rest of the audience online and virtual and here in person. I'm Vipul. I'm the Director for Energy Transition for Howden. Next slide, please. The next slide, please. And who are we? We are a risk broking firm that is developing about $35 billion in annual gross revenue, written premium rather. We have about 50 countries we operate in with over 100 networks and 15,000 employees in total. And why am I here to talk about energy transition? And you might be guessing or wondering why an insurance broker is here. I think Howden in specific are very passionate about energy transition. Our founder and the climate team that he has developed are very passionate about energy transition. We insure a lot of the natural resources that are there around the world that regards to energy, power, renewables. And now we believe that energy transition is the next sector of development that we are very passionate about. And we believe that there are a lot of risks emanating from these pathways. And we want to make sure that these pathways succeed. And for that, we have developed insurance solutions for them. Which are the pathways that we believe will be developed and progress to commercialization? Next slide, please. These three. Apologies that the font is a bit discolored. But the three pathways that we believe in for the energy transition to progress is hydrogen, carbon capture storage, and carbon markets. This is not to say that we don't believe in other energy transition pathways, but we believe that these three are the main pathways that will need a lot of support in developing, and these are very complex pathways that are very capital intensive as well, and because of that, we believe that insurance solutions are very vital to progress this pathway. When we talk about the complex value chain of CCS in specific, next slide please, we can focus on the three different aspects of CCS, which is the capture, the transport, and the sequestration phase. Now, each of these phases come with its unique set of risks that every developer has to face. When we talk about the capture phase, we talk about the solutions that are there to capture the CO2. If we talk about absorption and deabsorption process, then there is amine-based corrosion. Once you capture that CO2, then there's an issue of transporting that CO2. And if there is moisture ingress within the CO2 value chain, then carbonic acid hits in, and then again there's a corrosion aspect of it. When we look at then the transport of CO2 from the capture phase to the sequestration phase, we realize that CO2 transport is intermittent. And because of that, there is a risk of thermal expansion and contraction of those pipelines, further causing potential for CO2 risk. And finally, when we talk about sequestration phase, we heard quite a lot about the issues of CO2 leak. So that is a very big issue that we realize will be on the top concerns for many developers there. And CO2 risk solutions are something we have developed as well. So we have analyzed the entire value chain and realized what are the risks involved. And these risks will not only affect developers, but also investors coming into that value chain. When we are able to address those risks and come up with proper insurance solutions for them, we believe it will do two things. One is to enable new investment to come into this value chain, and secondly, obviously enable these developers who are already in this value chain to turn commercial and to obviously propagate and exponentially increase their developments in this value chain. Next slide, please. The value chain in itself is complex enough. But then when you see the next stage of CCS development, which is what we call a hub and cluster development, we realize that the value chain becomes even more complex. You are going to deal with offshore and onshore elements of the CCS value chain. You are going to have to work with a various amount of different OEMs, and together with that, they bring different technologies and different ways of doing things. And finally, you're going to talk about multiple CO2 suppliers. This further complicates the entire CCS value chain because, for example, when you talk about multiple CO2 suppliers, you have to ensure that all these CO2 suppliers provide on-spec CO2 to the hub. If the CO2 is off-spec, that enters the main value stream, again, corrosion can happen. Why am I talking about corrosion so much? I think we can look at the examples we have seen in Western Australia with the Gorgon project, for example. The Gorgon project was obviously a joint venture between three oil majors who definitely knew what they were doing. However, in the process of that value chain, there was moisture ingress, and that caused huge amount of corrosion, which then made that project come to a standstill. That standstill then actually began the venting of CO2 for that project, and the Western Australian government fined the joint venture $300 million in penalty. So it is a huge financial loss when environmental liability happens, when CO2 is vented out into the atmosphere. We do see that regulations will start to develop, especially in the environmental liability phase, where governments will enforce on developers to have certain environmental liability covers when they go about their CCS projects. Next slide, please. So, what are we doing in Howden to de-risk the value chain? There are tons of solutions that I will talk about later in our panel discussion, but we have developed two different sets of solutions. One is to de-risk the investors' risks that are coming into the value chain, and secondly, to de-risk the developers' risks that they are seeing in the value chain. And so when we do that, we enable the progress and proliferation of CCS in the development, and also ensure that there's continued investment and progress in the value chain. And I'll talk about those solutions a lot more in depth during the panel discussion. For that, I end here, and I thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shetty. And I would like to thank all the panelists for the very informative presentations. And they were so informative that we are about 15 minutes behind schedule, just to let you all know. So please keep that in mind as you're providing answers to the moderated questions. So we're going to go through some questions to each of the panelists, and then we will have time, hopefully, for some Q&A at the end of our discussion. So first, let me please start with Mr. Takahashi of JOGMEC. Let us begin with you. And thank you very much for sharing the details of those 7 role model projects that have been selected by JOGMEC as the Japanese advanced projects. Can you please let us know what comes next for these projects?
はい、今日7つのプロ
So today I have introduced to you 7 projects. But for these projects, as you may know already, the feasibility study will be conducted. It is a single-year contract. So for this fiscal year, for the fiscal year 2023, at the end of this fiscal year, the project will be over for now. Now, internally, including METI, we are making various consultations and considerations. And for next fiscal year, we are considering what to do. We are still discussing as to what we will be soliciting, but including that, the assessment of the sites for the CCS drilling, and also preparation towards FID. Those will be the processes that we will be going through. And one other point, because this is a single-year contract, for CCS to be spread inside Japan, we need to take step-by-step approach. Thus, as you may know, at the moment, at METI, they are looking at how to legislate the CCS Business Act. And Mr. Saiki, during the morning, mentioned that the legislation bill will be put forward to the Diet session, which will be beginning in January. So as METI is going through this process, the legal framework is not yet there. Thus, I don't think we will see smooth sailing right now. So we should start with low-hanging fruits. So for the CCS business operators, as we do not have the legislative framework not definitively decided, there are many uncertainties still. But I ask you to please proceed forward.
Thank you, Mr. Takahashi. And can you please tell us, building on that, how does this process help to address the funding of CCS projects in Japan? And what types of support will JOGMEC consider evaluating going forward?
はい、
Right. In my presentation, as I explained, we as JOGMEC, since the CCS project launch to the actual implementation on various stages, various support programs are offered by JOGMEC. Concerning the feasibility studies, FS, as I just shared with you, many projects have been conducted together with the businesses, private businesses. The METI, as in the morning session, several of you, including Mr. Saiki from METI, touched upon this. 2050 120 to 240 million tons, and by 2030, 6 million to 12 million tons. Those are the numbers that we have, and towards that end, various support is extended by JOGMEC. As I said at the end, advanced CCS projects. Concerning those projects, that's part of what we are doing towards those goals. And as I said at the outset, pre-FEED, at the early stage of a project, we extend support. So those are kinds of funding support that we extend.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Takahashi. If I could please ask Mr. Sakaguchi of Mizuho Bank, your presentation had a very detailed overview of high-level bankability considerations. I would ask if you could please elaborate on the revenue challenges for CCS projects right now.
Yeah, thank you. So I have already discussed, I said, project could be bankable if you could secure a revenue contract which makes stable revenue flow. That itself is a biggest challenge, because without any policy support or subsidy or other economics enhancement mechanism, at this moment, CCS project do not have much economic value. So if it is totally deferred to a private party negotiation, nobody will be able to step up and commit to pay a long-term service fee, which makes the project investable from a developer point of view, because developer need to earn appropriate level of return on their investment.
So can you please share your thoughts about what additional key enabling policies and regulations are needed that would help make these projects more bankable?
Thank you. So first of all, any policy support to enhance economics, either for the developer side or either for the emitter side, would strongly support the development of the projects. For example, a carbon pricing mechanism and other subsidy mechanism could plug the gap of the economics issues. But nevertheless, I think ultimately it is important that some counterparty provide long-term commitment to pay fixed fee for the project operation. And let's say if, for example, carbon pricing is introduced, but it's very challenging to predict the future price of a carbon credit. So there's a price risks. So it is very challenging to provide project financings, taking the risk of the volatility of a future CO2 credit risks. So that should work as a kind of, support to a counterparty who will then commit the long-term stable service fee. And that's one thing. And the second thing is, as of course, also already discussed, any other legal frameworks to set the kind of playground. CCS Business Act currently being developed in Japan, a similar regulation, which clearly set out what is the rights, what is the obligation, especially in relation to long-term CO2 leakage risks. Ideally, there should be a kind of cap or limitation in terms of the obligation of the developer. Otherwise, it will be too risky for any potential developer to commit to the long-term CCS business. And any kind of international treaty or agreement to make international cross-border CO2 shipping and trading possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Janya of Sumitomo Corporation, your presentation, you mentioned several CCS business strategies for Sumitomo. And so focusing on the business of CCS as a service, where do you see the opportunities in the near term for this business? And can you share with us some high-level insights about the market from your activities to date in that business?
Okay, thank you very much. So as I made a presentation, so I think the Europe and the North America is the one of the advanced market for us to enter. So as soon as possible. So there are some reason behind. So the first one is that those countries have a lot of the experience and the resources. That means the proven reservoir, a lot of the data, or the people who has the experience over the storage. So that's one thing. And the second one is as everybody say that. So the regulation and the policy in place well. And the third one is the government support, so like IRA or some tax benefits, something like that. So those kind of things, so they help the private company to enter into those markets. So that's one thing. And with regards to the IRA, yeah, from the private company's point of view, yeah, of course, this is very good. So that's stimulates the company's innovations. So because they give us the $80 or the $185 per ton, something like that. So and also that's very simple. But having said that, so the terms of this IRA is just only 12 years. It's a bit quite difficult for us. It's reluctant to enter, so hesitate. So in that sense, one of the good idea or the example is the Canada. So that's not the incentive, but the regulation, the Canada ETS. So, but they are clearly say that the 170 Canada dollar of the ETS will be in place in 2030. So that means that we can easily expect what things happens in the future. So in that sense, so as in Japan, so of course everybody say that the CCS Business Act will be in place. So I hope that kind of there are predictable things that happens in Japan as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for those insights on those things. So based on what you've seen to date, can you share what you think is holding back the participation by private finance in CCS projects?
Yeah, so I think a lot of things to prevent. But so one of the things for of course the technology. So the technology must be advanced or something. So, but the most important thing is of course cost. The cost for emitter. So actually, when we think about the CCS business from the storage side, I think it's better, easier. So just prepares those storage or the transportation, something like that. But the most important things for us is how the emitter pay that cost. So in that sense, so how can I say? So we have to make the full value chain from the emitter to the storage. Then so we try to make the clear revenue flow. So and then it's a long term. That is the most important things, as Sakaguchi-san says.
Thank you, Genya. That was very insightful. Mr. Kiyama of Mitsubishi Corporation, you are leading the sale of CDR credits to potential off-takers as part of the NextGen facility. And NextGen have announced the advanced purchase of approximately 200,000 tons of CDRs from technical carbon removal projects, 2 of which are in the US. And NextGen have also shared its ambition to purchase over 1 million tons of CDRs by 2025. So can you share, how does this approach by NextGen respond to what's missing to scale technical CDR projects?
Thank you for the question. So I think what is the missing part in the CDR market would be the demand or buyers who are willing to pay green premium. So I think there's like a chicken and egg dilemma between the supply and demand in a tech CDR market, similar to other emerging technologies. So on demand side, as I mentioned, everyone understood we need a tech CDR to achieve net zero, but the cost is very high. So every buyer or demand side says, we are willing, we purchase a tech CDR credit in the future if the cost reduced. But on the other hand, supply side, they're ready to start their first project right now. But most of the first of the kind project, the cost is very high. And they cannot start or launch project without buyers. But there's no buyers who are willing to pay green premium. Otherwise, they cannot reduce costs in the future. So there's such a dilemma right now. And what we need is a demand or buyers who are willing to pay green premium right now to support these industries. Then if there's a buyers, the project can start project, and the cost would be dramatically reduced through the experience and also large-scale volume. Therefore, we established NextGen recently to aggregate demand of the buyer's carbon credit who are willing to pay green premium. And we deploy such a demand to the project side, and we like to contribute to the scale of this market.
Yes, and CDR, but it's perceived as expensive, right, in comparison to other carbon mitigation technologies. So why is it important that we fund the deployment of CDR now when it is expensive?
Thanks so much. So I mentioned that right now there is no demand, but on the other hand, in the future, there will be the supply shortage. That was mentioned in a recent BCG report. So it says in 2030. So many companies has midterm or net zero goal in 2030, and they need a tech CDR credit to achieve their net zero, their target. So at that time, BCG mentioned that there would be the significant demand in 2030. But as you can imagine, DAX project or CCS project cannot be launched within 1 year. It takes a long time. So we need to start right now to scale tech CDR industry to achieve companies or worldwide net zero goal by 2030 or 2050. So again, the action right now is very, very critical to achieve the corporate target by 2030.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those insights. And then finally, Mr. Shetty of Howden Specialty, one of the key challenges, some of which you mentioned in your presentation, which getting CCS projects financed is the allocation and management of the project risks. And we also know that development capital or capital allocated prior to the project's final investment decision, or FID, is hard to secure. So can you please share with us, how does Howden help to de-risk both the pre-FID phase for the projects, and in contrast, also the post-FID phase for the projects through construction and operation?
Thanks, Christina. So I think what we heard from Junya-san was pretty much the same as all the different developers entering the CCS space. There is a risk of tech, and there's also a risk of cost, right? So many developers have the same issues there. And so when we sat down to realize, okay, how do we enable developers to enter this space, we started to think about what are the solutions they would require to enable them to enter. So the first thing we've developed was a new technology insurance warranty. When we talk about CCS, there is a lot of new technology coming into that space. We talk about all the different types of capture technology there are, cryogenic, physical, absorption, deabsorption. All these are being developed by a whole host of OEMs and different developers. So there is a performance guarantee there that needs to be developed for these projects. And so for that, we have developed an insurance solution that will enable these developers to buy that insurance. And if that performance, that technology does not perform to its said abilities, then the insurance policy does kick in to cover for any loss in that area. The next thing we've developed when we looked at the technology is that the warranties provided by these OEMs are not enough. When we look at warranties for these new technologies, we are seeing probably 2 to 3 years worth of warranties, from electrolyzers to capture technology. So when a developer or investor looks at that and they realize, okay, I have comfort for 2 to 3 years, but these projects will go on for 10 to 20 years, what happens then? So the next solution we've developed was a warranty extension cover. So this cover extends the warranty and the said warranties in that technology and ensures, again, there is a more longer runway for the warranty cover to be in force. The third thing we realized when we look at a lot of developers in this region is that they don't know to a certain degree what to do next. Right? They have an idea about CCS. They kind of know who the technology providers are. They kind of know who the suppliers and demand could be. But I think consulting is one of the biggest spaces that they're facing a gap on. Right. So this is not the consulting that is needed for the likes of Exxon, Shell, or Chevron. Right. These developers have probably 200 to 300 executives in each of those companies. But it's the smaller SMEs, the smaller energy and power developers who need consulting. Techno-economic consulting as to, okay, what is going to happen when I enter the value chain? What is my supply cost? What is the demand cost? And so that is where we have developed in partnership with very key technology consultants, technical consultants rather, to provide this service for the developers and investors coming into that space as to understand the value chain very properly. On top of that, we have what is called the Climate Risk and Resilience Team that is filled with consultants who are specialized in ESG and sustainability reporting. Now, hydrogen, CCS, carbon credits, any endeavor in the energy transition space still has to adhere to certain ESG and sustainability frameworks. And for that, when our client or investor goes into this area, they need to understand what are the sustainability reporting regulations there and whether they are abiding by it going into this area. And so we've developed all these solutions for the investors. Now, talking about the developers who are going into the construction phase and the operational phase, we have also developed insurance solutions for them to cover the entire value chain, from the capture all the way to sequestration, regardless of whether it is onshore or offshore, right? So that covers the entire value chain. And you might ask, what have we done differently as compared to a typical energy or power insurance policy? For that, we have looked at the different risks that are emanating in the value chain, from the capture all the way to sequestration, and made sure that the insurance policy has specific wording to cover the clients as well as cover the insurers. Now, we want to make sure that this CCS value chain is a value chain that will last for decades. We don't want it to be a solution that is hit and run. We just place the business, a bunch of insurers come in, they don't understand the process, there's a bunch of losses in millions of dollars, and no insurance company wants to touch it again. So for us, we want to make sure that when we come up with a CCS solution, that it addresses all the concerns of the client, but also make sure that the insurers are properly protected so that they stay within this pathway for a long time to come. The third and most important thing is environmental liability from escape of CO2. Escape of CO2 can happen in any phase of the value chain, whether it's the capture phase, the transport phase, or the final sequestration phase. As I said earlier, there were huge fines paid by certain companies due to the failure of sequestration, and also if that CO2 is sequestered and it does escape, there is an environmental liability aspect there, and we have developed insurance solutions to make sure that you are covered for that environmental liability damage. And the last thing I want to talk about is the carbon credit that is lost from CO2 sequestration escape. So when that CO2 escapes, there is an environmental liability loss, but there's also a loss in carbon credit derived from that CO2 that was captured. So we are working on a financial insurance solution to make sure that any loss in that carbon credit can then be insurable, and that developer can then buy again the carbon credit too, possibly pay for purchases of the carbon credit. So in that aspect, we have covered both the investors coming to the space and also the developers in this current CCS value chain. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shetty. So given where we are with the time, I want to make sure, we have one more question, but I want to make sure if there are questions in the audience that we have time to ask those, and the online questions as well. So I would ask right now, do any of the audience members have a question for our panelists? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions from the audience. I'm going to go ahead and ask one of the online. Oh, here we are.
Thank you. Can I ask a question in Japanese? My name is Sako from Asahi Chemical. From Asahi Chemical, it is a chemicals business, and we are emitter, so we are interested in CCS from emitter's point of view. Mr. Sakaguchi of Mizuho Bank, in your presentation, you have mentioned 4 different contract models, and you had tolling, PPP. Now, thinking about this, for CCS, it is just like internet. CCS, you would have to have a large scale or dedicated line to be built. And then as users increase in number, the cost will be reduced and it will be spread widely. Then the dedicated line was a fixed expense, but then it would become more of a use service-based fee tolling. And for CCS, you need to have such an evolution to be made. But on the other hand, green transition is something we need to do immediately. We cannot wait for years or decades. So for what Mr. Sakaguchi has suggested, all those 4 models need to be conducted in parallel. That is the debate we hear in Japan. For example, CCUS models and so forth. Are you engaged in such debate, or are you just concentrating on big emitters? Because we are more of a smaller scale emitters. So who should I ask this question to? I'm not really sure. But this is the point I wanted to raise. Thank you very much. Now, I do not know what kind of mechanism will be built and introduced in Japan. We are now collecting the relevant information ourselves. So as you rightly said, this service, as they penetrate and being used widely, then there will be market created. And then supply and demand will be easily matched in the market mechanism. That could eventually come in a little bit far future for CCS. Then, without long-term contract, you will be able to see some predictability and certainty for your contract in terms of finance as well. That could be eventually the world that we will be living in. One example is LNG. For LNG, you have more than 40 years of history. And the market has developed, and you have spot trading right now. But without any profiler, I don't think the contract is free and discreetly been established. So the revenue must be assured for more than 10 years. And that is a very high hurdle. So if it is a commodity which is more easily traded, then that's fine. But if it is LNG, where only a handful of the business operators having the technology could do. So for CCS, you need the specialized the players. So if you do have such constraints, market mechanism cannot be easily created. So it would be one-on-one trade. So perhaps those who have taken the risk on the front end, the economics could be perhaps supported and to be assisted. So who should pay initially? There could be 3 different patterns that you can think of. I do not know which will be more realistic. And that is what we are thinking about.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have another question from the audience at this time?
Could I speak in Japanese? TNO. My name is Nishide, Research Institute. Netherlands, in Europe, as a way of consortia, various stakeholders jointly can work on a certain project. That system has been well developed, whereas in Japan, within one company or within one organization, people tend to work on a project. Because of that tendency, on an issue like this, with people from external community working together seems to be rather difficult. This is just my impression. But going forward, we need to join hands in certain areas, or by cooperation, you could leverage. I'm sure that there are certain areas. So the preparing for a cooperation system, who should actually lead those activities to have cooperation? Or, to begin with, is it something that can be realized? Anybody is welcome to answer my question. Anybody? Well, regarding your question, yes, that tendency that might be observed, but people from various background cooperating with each other, I think that's part of the CCS projects all about in various places, about CCS activities and CCS related fora and conferences. I had a chance to speak to the people. What they say is that cooperation with various companies is necessary. They say that. So I think that we are moving to that direction. But I think that we need to accelerate that move. My understanding is that we are moving to that direction. May I? In principle, that should be the best way to go. As Sakaguchi-san, in addressing the question one before that, it's not LNG, but at the time of launch, together with big emitters, having kind of arrangement on storage one by one, that creating value chain. I think that's the pathway we must follow. But will that be the end picture? Personally, I don't think that will be the end picture. Certain regional connection can be utilized, but they're moving on to the one direction. Hub and cluster is an expression used in Europe. Without doubt, those things will happen, and that must happen. In the morning session, the Saeki-san from METI talked about aggregation. He used the word aggregation. So such function will become necessary in the future. That's my personal opinion. So who's going to do that? I think that's what you asked at the end. If I dare say so, trading company. We are rooted in multiple industries, and we have been co-working with others. So that function, we in the trading houses must do so. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you, Janya.
ありがとうございました。いかがで
Here we are. Another question from the audience at this time. Well, while you all are thinking of another question, let me ask one online question that we received, and this question is for Mr. Sakaguchi. Mr. Sakaguchi, of the 4 models that you presented, can you give your opinion as to which would work best for a cross-border CCS project for Japan?
Yes. Amongst the various potential revenue models, I think, especially for cross-border one, probably case 1 or 2, these 2 should work better than the other model, because case 1, 2 does not need any kind of underlying regulations, a special kind of policy mechanism to make it possible. That model is widely utilized in any projects, even in developing countries. But for example, PPP scheme, there has to be government entity who commit to pay long term, and regulated asset-based model is to be even more complicated. So it basically firstly the kind of business environment which makes regional monopoly possible. That is the first building block to make lab model works. That part is particularly difficult, especially when there's no kind of very strong need to utilize that CCS project. That is more suitable for power distribution, gas distribution, regional heating, those kind of essential infrastructure, and the user has no choice but to use that infrastructure. Then a regulator comes in and controls the tariff level, so that the project operator does not make too much profit or too small profit. That is the whole concept. So to apply that model to CCS is possible, but as I said, it needs very many kind of conditions needs to be satisfied beforehand.
Can you please remind us what was case one and case two? Have the slides. What was case one?
What, sorry?
Oh, I was just asking if you could remind us what was case one.
Case one is the emitter, basically large emitter who have sufficient credit worthiness to pay the service fee on a fixed basis. But that needs emitter to commit the payment of that service fee for longer term. That may be challenging, especially when the emitter itself has no kind of clear future plan of a carbon emission. If their plans are to reduce carbon emission as soon as possible, this will become too much burden. So case two, that the project developer will pay a fixed fee to the SPC they own. And then the project entity, SPC, should be perfectly bankable. But that put maybe too much burden on the sponsor or total payer side. But the flip side of that is sponsors have full flexibility how they receive fee from emitters. So there could be the set of shorter contracts and even spot contracts, and they can freely switch kind of emitter to work with. And they maybe even able to take the upside if carbon credit price go up in the future. But they also take all the kind of downside and the risks if something goes wrong.
Oh, thanks. That's helpful. We just don't have the slides, so I just wanted to make sure people knew which cases to which you were referring. Do we have any questions from the audience? Well, let me go ahead and ask one more online question, and I do have some other questions for the panelists in case we need to go to them, but let's see. Oh, yes, Mr. Takahashi of JOGMEC, this question came in for you, and I will summarize it because it is a very long question, but basically the question is around information sharing from projects, pointing out that in other countries where government money is used to fund projects, the information is shared broadly, and that allows people to take advantage of the lessons learned. So the question is, in Japan, when implementing the advanced CCS projects, is knowledge sharing for CO2 storage data being considered as part of that program?
Right. About storage. At this moment, it's rather difficult for me to talk about this. We have identified a certain range of places, but in the future, what's going to happen? I don't think it's been decided. I happen not to be in charge of this, and I don't want to say anything wrong, but to the extent that I understand, there are points that need to be discussed further. I'm so sorry that it's such an ambiguous answer, but that's the current situation.
Completely understood. Thank you for providing your response. Very much appreciated. Any questions from the audience right now? Well, let me turn to the panelists with one of the questions that we discussed in our preparation, and that was regarding the speculation for transportation of CO2 between Japan and Southeast Asia and Australia. And of course, after we prepared this question, and as we heard today, Australia has passed the amendment bill, and there is now a full legislative framework in place that could potentially address this situation. So, but what I'd like to ask the panelists in terms of the speculated transportation between Japan and Australia, is this approach cost effective in the near term for managing CO2, and or how could this process be made more cost effective in the future? And in your opinion, are there any big missing pieces still, whether that's from a policy, legal, regulatory, technical, or other standpoint, that you think needs to be addressed in order to bring this to reality? And if any panelists would like to comment, please.
Let me answer to the question. So that's not my main role, but as a Mitsubishi Corporation, so we are very working on CO2 transportation from Japan to Southeast Asia and also Australia. And we adapt like a comprehensive approach to study such a CO2 transition project. And maybe simple answer to your final question would be everything's needed, like technology improvement is very important, and also government incentive or regulatory support is very, very critical. And also maybe collaboration of the industries, similar to the previous question from the floor. The collaboration industry is very critical to achieve the cost effectiveness, because to scale the CO2 CCS project, we need a multiple CO2 resources. So aggregation of the CO2 source from multiple industries is very, very important to reduce the cost, to enjoy the scale merit. And also collaboration between the government is also critical. Like an international cooperation is vital to address some challenge, legal or governance challenge between the countries, such as CO2 accounting. And also, in addition to cost effectiveness, we also think that like a reliable CCS project, reliable CO2 sourcing is also important to achieve the project timeline.
Jenya.
Well, thank you very much. So for the Sumitomo Corporation, we also have announced that the cross-border CCS from Japan to Australia. So the MOU has been agreed with the K-Line and the Toho Gas and the Woodsides. So in that sense, actually, as the Koyama-san says, there are a lot of the things have to be done well to materialize that's the cross-border CCS. Having said that, I would like to say something about the policy, infrastructure, and the standardizations. So the first one is a policy on the regulation. As Brad-san said, so the London Protocol, so that have to be needed. So that means the bilateral agreement between Australia and Japan. So it will be in place. That's first things. And the second one is the infrastructure and the facility. So as I said, so as the previous question, so we of course the aggregation maybe or must be needed in the future. So in the tank or the storage tank or the ship, so those kind of the infrastructure is a huge cost. That means that we have to share that cost as much as possible. And the last one is a standardization. So one of the example is the CO2 concentration. So sorry, purify. It's in Japan, for example, 99%, and NOx, SOx, something like that. And in Australia, different rule or something. It's quite difficult to transport from Japan to Australia in the one same CO2 qualification. So that means the standardization is also one of the key factor for us. Thank you.
そうですね。
Well, Australia.
The Seed Dumping Act has been passed through in Australia. This is very good news. For JOGMEC, we have been watching carefully what has been happening in Australia. Now, even before that, including METI, we have been also approaching various ministries and agencies in Australia, and also the state governments as well, and territory governments for the cross-border transport. And we would like to speed up such discussion going forward. And furthermore, as Mr. Saiki of METI has mentioned, METI and JOGMEC, this is not Australia, but in Malaysia, we have already concluded MOC. And in the MOC, we have been speeding up our discussion on cross-border transport. So we should start the discussion, first of all, and we would like to spread to Australia and other places eventually. Now, there is one more concern that we have. Well, Malaysia has not yet ratified the London Protocol, and Australia is in a different position. So, the difference in legal frameworks, how should we approach this question, is one point of concern, and this is something we need to deepen our discussion with the different stakeholders. But in any case, the discussion will be accelerated going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Takahashi.
Christina, sorry if I could add.
Oh, absolutely,
yeah,
please.
Sorry.
Yes.
I think when the question about cost effectiveness of transboundary CO2 shipment was asked, we have to ask ourselves, what other option is there, right? If Japan needs to hit the 240 million tons of CO2 sequestration by 2050, and we only have about 7 sites now or in development, there is no other option, is there, other than doing transboundary shipment. It is the very same for Singapore as well. As a small island, we can't sequester our own CO2. Transboundary shipment will be the only solution, and we have to make it work. So as to how we make that work, I think comes down to what are the challenges. I think the main challenges are on technology development, that has to develop a lot quicker. But I think aside from the standardization of gas itself, I think it's also the standardization of the equipment that all the different nations start to use. There will be no point if everybody starts to go down the pathway of a different standardization and then you try to do cross-boundary shipment. It's just not going to work. If we think about the EV, electric vehicle value chain, and how we've started to standardize the charging points, I think in a similar manner, we have to start standardizing the injection terminals, the receiving terminals, and the kind of equipment that we are going to use. And I think my last point is on regulation, very similar to how Australia has now developed the new regulation and amendments. I think all the other nations have to also develop the similar regulations. There is no point that Australia does it alone and all the other nations don't have similar regulations. Then we will go nowhere. Right? All the different countries have to have similar corresponding regulations to enable transboundary CO2 shipment for this to progress. That's my piece.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shetty. So at this time, I would ask my Japanese colleagues, we have one Japanese question in the Zoom chat. Do we have time to take that?
Yeah, actually, it's the same question about the information sharing of the CCS project.
Oh.
So it has been already answered by Takahashi.
No worries. Yeah, I just didn't know that because I don't read Japanese. All right. Well, I think we are then at the end of our time, and so I would like to very much thank our panelists for all of that insightful conversation and their very detailed presentations. So please join me in thanking our panelists for our session today.
I would like to thank the panelists as well as moderator. Thank you very much, Christina. So, the Global CCS Institute, the representative of the Global CCS Institute Japan, Mr. Nambo, would like to speak. Thank you. So we have 2 keynote speakers and then 8 panelists, or should I say 8 speakers and 5 panelists. With all of your kind cooperation and participation, we were able to have a wonderful and excellent discussion. It has been more than 10 years since I have come to be involved in CCS. But CCS seems to have more and more realistic. That is my strong feeling, especially for the sequestration and capture. Not only the point sources, but we also have more of a locally produced and locally consumed, more small-scale projects will continue to be introduced and increased, and including direct capture. There will be diversified modes of the decarbonization, and also combination of shipping and pipeline. There are all sorts of different and diverse modalities, and it could be within one country or it could be cross-border and transboundary projects where different countries and parties need to collaborate with each other. So when we look at the matrix, there are all sorts of different and diverse combinations, and all sorts of technologies need to be utilized, and you need to have the legal framework and also regulations and finance to be made available. So there are all sorts of different problems that need solutions to be brought. Global CCS Institute, it has been 11 years since the founding of the Institute, and more recently, not just the engineers in the capture sector, but geologists and legislative experts, economists. We have allocated experts in all sorts of different fields so that we will be able to collect the relevant information and sort them out to provide information to all our membership. And as was mentioned towards the end, network and collaboration are very important. So we hope to continue to provide the platform for this. In any case, the CCS is now deemed to be important technology in tackling the climate change. And this is something indispensable as a technology for energy security purpose as well. I'm sure everyone here would agree to this. So we hope that we will be able to commercialize and deploy ever more projects in the world. So if you could continue to give us your kind support to the Institute. And today, we were able to have successful forum. And I would like to thank all the speakers and panelists, as well as the facilitator, Christina. And lastly but not least, who have stayed on in this hall in person, and all of those who have joined the symposium virtually on online basis. I thank you very deeply. And from morning to the evening, quality interpretation had been provided, and I thank the interpreters. Thank you. And this concludes the Japan CCS Forum 2023. Thank you very much indeed.